Stealth 2 is finally here. So how does it perform? The Carbonwood is back for 2023, and this time it's got, well, more carbon. That's right, we've got the Stealth 2, the new upgrade from last year's Stealth. Literally everything in this club head is carbon except for this front titanium section. In fact, there's 50% more carbon in this driver than there is titanium, so it really is getting to that point where it nearly is a full carbon wood. Compared to last year, we've got full carbon on the sole here, which is obviously saving weight that can be kind of redistributed. We can see one of the ways TaylorMade has done that is by adding this big weight on the back, so they can kind of optimize that CG location better. It also means we can have a bigger adjustable weight here in the sole on this front track, so you can move around that and provide more adjustability to your ball flight if you want to do so. The other big change here is to the club face. One, you can see visually the colours of these are different. The new version is a lot lighter and more tonal, and I think that sits really nicely behind the golf ball. But actually this is 2 grams lighter than the original Carbonwood face. That might sound like not a lot at all, but 2 grams in the world of golf clubs is huge because it means you can do so much with that weight in other areas. But another thing about it being lighter means that it's more efficient, so in theory you should get more ball speed. TaylorMade have also messed with the thicknesses of this, so the edge is a lot thinner now and the centre is thicker, so that's just going to give you a little bit more flexion and again hopefully drive up those ball speeds. As we saw last year, TaylorMade have stuck to those 3 different models. So we've got the Stealth 2 Plus, which is the one I actually got fitted to, then we've got the main Stealth model, and we've also got the Stealth HD, which is more of that max forgiveness and match draw bias model. Now this is more of the low spin offering. Let's start with this and see how it performs compared to last year's. So first up, there are quite a few visual differences. The biggest thing that I really like is the fact they've gone to a gloss finish on the top of the club head. I just think it really gives that kind of traditional look, and I just really like the way it sits behind the golf ball. They've also quite deliberately changed the top line, and I think some of that comes back from tour player feedback. They wanted kind of that alignment aid to sit a little bit straighter and help with them just getting square behind the golf ball. So both of those things sit really nicely. Then other than that, in terms of shaping, I wouldn't say there's a massive amount of difference, and both of them sit nicely behind the golf ball. I mean, it's a good start because it's gone straight down the middle. Cut a little bit on the wind. So straight off, 234 carry, 2,300 spin. Pretty good benchmark. It's quite interesting to see just how much the kind of ball speed and the numbers vary depending on where you're testing them. I mean, I've tested them these in England where it's freezing, in Dubai where it's very warm, and then here in Portugal at Prada del Rey where we're kind of in the middle. And you can actually see how the ball speed moves in terms of that kind of relative to the heat and the conditions. I think it's quite important if you're getting fitting to look at how the TrackMan or whatever tech they're using is set up, because a lot of times they can be optimized to different weathers. Are you actually going to play in those conditions, and what kind of temperature do you want it to be optimized for? It's a really nice ball flight. Even though this is like the lower spin model, some people might think that that equates to like really kind of low flight, low spin everything. But actually that's really nice. I've launched that really nice and high and it's still got like 2,400 spin. So I think sometimes people might be scared by that low spin offering, but it's not always as low as people think, and it's relative to kind of how you hit it. And personally, I think this one's performing really nicely. From a looks and like feel point of view, I think TaylorMade have really nailed it here. Like when you hit a really good shot like that, it just feels really nice, and I love the performance. It's quite interesting because the whole Carbonwood story is about that extra ball speed, and for me, I don't particularly feel like the ball speed is that fast here. So we're seeing like 138 there, but it is very efficient because I'm still only getting 240 carry out of that. But compared to some of the other drivers I've hit, I'm getting less ball speed but the same carry. So the face is very efficient, but I'm not sure if it's showing me the maximum ball speeds that I could get. Yeah, anyway. What I do really like about this though is the stability, which feels weird to say about a low spin model, but I just feel like I can swing this as hard as I want and it's still going to kind of go where I want it to go. Struck that one really nicely, and interesting, The ball speed's jumped up to 140, my carry distance has jumped up to 241, but the spin has jumped up massively to 3,500. Let's hit a few with last year's model now and see what the differences are. So for fairness of test, I've just popped the same shaft in here. This is a KBS TD that I've been fitted for, and it's the 60 category 3 option. Still a really nice high ball flight. There actually is a difference of feel in the face, which is interesting. Since they've changed, like, obviously the weight of it this year, this feels like lighter and more tinny off the face, which is quite interesting. Now, while I did really like this last year, I felt like some of my shots spun quite a lot. So it'd be interesting to see if we get that again. That was like 2,700. So maybe a tad on the high side, but not terrible. Now, what would I be expecting to see differences here? Now, we're looking year to year in terms of generational change, so I wouldn't think it'd be massive, maybe like 1.5 mile an hour ball speed. Both those days were in like the high 130s, so fairly similar, but we haven't got to the 140s yet. Interestingly, I would say this one probably launches a little bit lower, which would make sense given the fact we've obviously got more weight on the back now because they've got that carbon sole, so you can kind of move that weight here, which would help the ball launch higher in the new model compared to this. Definitely a little bit lower. The ball speed is pretty consistent though. I literally had 138, 139 for basically every shot. So let's just take a quick look at those averages. I think it's quite interesting to look year to year and see how improvements are being made, but it's not necessarily all about would you make the jump from a Stealth to a Stealth 2. I think probably the people who are in the market for a driver now are probably the people who've bought drivers in the sim era. So in terms of overall distance, the big thing I was looking for was ball speed. Would the ball speed change because they've got that kind of weight difference in the face? So we've gone from 137.8 with the last year's Stealth Plus to 138.9 with this year's. So about 1.1 ball speed increase, which TaylorMade were saying from their testing, they were seeing about 1.5 on average. That's obviously going to be different for each player. So there's definitely a little bit of increase there. In terms of club speed, I was basically the same with both. I was 93.6 on average with last year's and 93.8 with this year's, so I'm basically putting pretty much the same thing in. In terms of carry distance, I've actually gone up about 6 yards, so we've gone from 230 to 236.9, so that's nice, a little bit of an improvement. But actually the interesting thing here is the launch. So both of these were set at 9 degrees, I had the same shaft in them, and my launch angle with last year's Stealth was 15.1, whereas with the Stealth 2 we've gone up to 16.5, and the difference with that in terms of that total height then was like 11 feet, which is obviously quite a lot. So I think that's quite interesting for someone who might want to hit it a little bit higher. It's definitely going to kind of help with hang time and getting more distance. Another thing that's quite interesting is the spin has actually dropped here about 300 RPM. So in terms of someone who wants a little bit less spin, there's definitely a little bit more in this year's model compared to last year's in terms of helping you out with that spin. So you're getting that mixture of a higher launch and less spin, which is obviously going to be more optimal for kind of that maximum distance. I'd say for me, probably the biggest thing between the two though was that if I wanted to kind of really go at one and feel like I wanted to hit it to carry something, I felt like my downrange dispersion was tighter. Like probably with last year's model, I felt like I wouldn't comfortably just stand and smack it. Whereas with this year's model, I felt a bit freer to do that. And I think that kind of shows in the dispersion. I kind of tried to hit half with each that were like going for it and half like not. There's quite a big difference in dispersion. Maybe this one was probably not that accurate because it's just a badder shot. Maybe bigger spread. This year's definitely was a little bit more right biased, but I think that probably is better player preferred because we see a lot of people who use low spin drivers, they don't like to hit it left. Obviously, TaylorMade have changed a bit of the alignment cues to help with that, so maybe it could just in fact be the visual thing of the alignment and not just the golf club, but it's quite interesting to see the differences there. Right, I think that's enough head to head of like last year to this year. Now I just want to chat through like the different models they've got, because obviously they've got those 3 different heads and they're all designed to perform a little bit differently. Also, how good do they all look? I love how they've added this like red bit on the back again. It kind of reminds me of like the blue on the Sim 2, and I really liked that. So this is just the straight up Stealth 2, and this is designed to be much more in the middle of the offering. So how it kind of works is you've got like the plus on this end, the HD on this end, and the idea is this is the lowest launching and the lowest spinning. And as you move across to the Stealth 2 and then to the Stealth 2 HD, you're getting more launch, more spin, and also more forgiveness as you move that way. So in theory, this should sit nicely in the middle, but what I've learned from years of testing is each model doesn't always do what you think it's going to do, and it is still always relative to each person and how they kind of swing the golf club. Nice, very straight. Pulled it a little bit though, so it's launched a bit lower. So personally to me, this club head feels kind of a little bit bigger. So my club head speed's dropped down a little bit, but in terms of carry distance, it's still pretty good. So that was like 234 for 137 ball speed. So still very similar compared to the Plus, really. That was very toey, and the ball flight was pretty stable. Like, it definitely felt like it stayed more on line than if I'd hit that shot with the Plus. Obviously the idea is it gets more forgiving as you move down, and I think you can kind of feel that. I mean, the spin was off the charts then, but that was definitely my fault. Again, it's just like a really nice high ball flight, but I don't personally feel like, for me, there is massive differences between these two models. I mean, obviously literally I've got exactly the same setup, and I would say this one's probably spinning a little bit more and maybe launching 1 foot higher, but overall there's not too much there. So let's swap into the HD, and probably from that to the Plus is where we're going to see the biggest difference. Right, last up we've got the HD. So this is the one out there for everyone who slices it / hits power fades. Now, my bad miss is usually left. So let's see how this goes. You know what, this is actually so nice. Definitely launches the highest, undoubtedly. And then it did go down the left side, but it's still like left edge of the fairway. I would say the data is good too. So that was like 139 ball speed, 233 carry, a lot of spin. There is a lot of spin, 3,200. I think especially if you're someone who has kind of a low dippy flight, having that extra spin is really going to help keep the ball up there. I mean, that's so nice. It's like started straight down the centre line and curved back in. And this is long too. Like, what I like about this is the fact that a lot of kind of draw models, you feel like you're giving up distance for that extra forgiveness in the shot shape. That's had 140.5 ball speed for 240.5 carry. This is like a really long and forgiving model. I just really feel like I can hit this and there's no chance of it going right, which is pretty ideal. I feel like that is like ideal scenario for a lot of golfers. That's just carried 247.5. This is meant to be like the most forgiving model. I'm not even convinced I hit this in my fitting, because they were just like, no, let's go for the low spin one. Which definitely teaches you a lesson. You should try everything, even if you don't think it's for you. I mean, it feels impossible to miss the fairway. That wasn't my best strike. I'd say it was a little bit bottomy. Yeah, 230 for 138 ball speed. But I mean, my bad shot is finished like 4 foot right of the centre line in the fairway. Like, that felt like it should have been really cutty. It did spin a lot, 4,000 or 5,000, not optimal. So good. That's got to be long. It felt like it went a long way. Really disappointed if it's not gone a long way now. 248.6. I just nearly carried this 250 in a model that, in theory, is completely wrong for me. This is really good. I mean, look at that dispersion. Look at that grouping compared to the other ones. I mean, the Plus was pretty good. That's pretty good. That was like optimized and fit for me. But then look at that, like straight down the center line. The shortest shot is still like only just shorter than what I was getting with the Plus. And look how far some of these longer ones are going. I mean, the width of that dispersion is 25 yards. Maybe I've got a new gamer and it's not quite what I expected it would be.